Thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be back. It's energizing to be with you, and I've had a great day already. I've met with so many other people from different areas of the school and had from all the different functions, et cetera, and also had a great lunch and I want to make sure you find out who was at the lunch with us, because what I'm going to talk about, I'm just doing what they told me to do, so they're responsible for the talk. No, it's been great to be here. But I'm also very humbled to be here in the sense that this is the first of the Darden Leadership Series talks, and for someone from Celgene and myself to be here, it's a very humbling experience. So I'm very proud to be with you and appreciate the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you. So you walk down the hallway, you see the picture of those people who have done this before. I said, whoa, that's pretty nice company. So thanks for having me. The presentation today has caused me a lot of angst and turmoil as to what to talk about. And there's so many things that I say. You have an opportunity to meet people who are leaders today and going to be future leaders of an increasing way of our society in so many different areas. You don't get that opportunity that often. So I was really in a quandary. What should I talk about? Healthcare in America today, it's at a crossroads. We've got so many important things. Your lives are going to be so different 10 years from now because of the changes in healthcare and the revolutions that are going on, some very good and some very challenging. And our society doesn't talk enough about these issues. We'd rather talk about Lindsay Lohan's rehab than talking about the impact of demographic changes and not encouraging biomedical innovation in our society, the economic impact. So many important issues for us to talk about. But I also said Celgene pays my salary, and I better talk a little bit about Celgene too. And I thought about, I do come back on occasion for John Colley's class, Managers Taking Action. How many second years do we have here? Anybody? Or mostly, oh, wow. I thought it was going to be all first years. How many first years are here? All right, so we've got a balance. Well, at the end of his class, they ask you a couple of questions, and one of the questions, and they thank God they ask the same question every time you come back, so you can get your answer down over time. And what would you like to have known when you were here that you now know? And I would always tell people at that class, I would say, I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. And I wouldn't want to have known anything more than I knew, because it's the journey that matters. It's not the destination. It's what you get out of the journey, what you put into the journey, what impact you have, the difference that you make, and the value that you create. And that's a learning process that will hopefully go on for as long as you're alive. And so knowing the answers, I'm not sure that's helpful, because it's going to be a journey no matter what. But as I thought about it, I said, I have been so fortunate, and I did use this as an opportunity for me to step back and think about what is it that has helped me be so fortunate, and so that maybe not just for this audience, but for other people that I work with in other places, how do we share this discussion of these things to ensure that if there are things that help people be more successful, how do we ensure we communicate them? And the other troubling thing about it was, as I was thinking about the talk, you should always think about the audience, right? People are nice enough to come here and listen to you. You should be thinking, what would be useful for them to hear? What would they like to hear? What's valuable, et cetera? And you all are so nice to be here, because when I was here, I'd be probably out beating Professor Brownlee's butt into the ground on the softball field, and I probably wasn't smart enough or mature enough to come to these kind of presentations. So I feel a tremendous responsibility to try and do something of at least interest and hopefully a little bit of value to you. So I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I said, so I'm thinking about the audience, these bright people, some younger than others, but a lot of Darden students that have a perspective on things, and I have three great kids, 23, 22, and 19, and they're always giving me advice. And so the first thing I was thinking about in the talk, I said, until I was 35 years old, I was convinced I thought the same way I did when I was 17. And I'd go back to Princeton, my alma mater, involved with student groups. And finally, when I was 35, I realized I don't see things the way these kids do at 19 and 20. They want to do destructive things that I wouldn't have done. But anyway, it took me to 35 to realize that I wasn't 17 anymore. And this summer, I had, my family will be very surprised that I say this. I turned 60 this summer. It's like so shocking. How could I be 60 years old? It's impossible. And we agreed, my family, we're not going to celebrate my 60th birthday till next summer. So 1 year of denial. And I said, you know, how do I relate and resonate to these people? So you have caused me a lot of consternation as I thought about what to talk about. And so I'm going to talk about all three of those subjects, a little bit about my journey and some of the things that I think have provided me some of the assistance to dealing with some of the challenges and take advantage of the opportunities that have been afforded to me. But also, before I do, I want to say a couple of things to the students in the room. I am one great example that I hope will make you feel good that the investment that you're making in your time and your resources to be here will pay dividends, and it will have an influence on your life. You will be a stronger creative thinker with a better framework for problem solving. The relationships you build here will help improve the quality of your life through your lifetime. And so the investment that you're making, I believe, will give you great opportunity and improve your life in many different ways. And for some of the faculty here, I also want to say thank you, and also that what you do does matter, and that the value that you provide and the resources and your emotion and intellect that you provide makes a difference in people's lives, and it certainly made a difference in my life. So thank you very much. And as you can already tell, my children's advice to me, because I grew up in an urban setting and didn't realize I was resource constrained, and so I always have to tell my kids who are not as resource constrained the stories of the old time. They always say, Dad, get to the point, get to the point. So their advice is, deliver the message, let's go. Okay, so I am gonna look a little bit about some of the lessons from my journey. So when I go to John Colley's class next winter, I'm gonna have to answer the question. The first thing that struck me was, I think for me, knowing myself is so important, and I think that's probably true for most people. No one knows themselves better than anybody else. You know yourself better than anybody else does. You know what you're good at. You know what you like. And that awareness is so important to your success in life and in business. And when I think about it, how lucky I am that I had people that cared about me. My thesis advisor in college was a great man, and I would go back to Princeton when I was in the Marine Corps and stay with him when I visited Princeton. We had become good friends, and he was actually exactly 40 years older than me. And I spent 7 years in the Marine Corps. After about 4 years in the Marine Corps, I'd always going to go to law school. And he said, Bob, you've been in the Marine Corps. Do you want to be a commanding officer or you want to be a staff officer? I said, that's pretty clear to me. I want to be the freaking commanding officer. He said, go to business school. Don't go to law school. And so I was lucky that people cared about me and said, listen, know yourself. Know what's important to you, and be thoughtful about that. So, and I came here to Darden to square away American manufacturing. The Japanese had bought Rockefeller Center. They were taking over the world. Harvard Business Review put that the financial advantage that Japanese banks have will put them in a leadership position for the next 100 years, and the lower cost of capital and all this other stuff that Dean knows so well. And they didn't really want me. I don't know if they really want. They didn't want to pay me that much if I was going to go there. And the people that were going there, really, I didn't sort of pal around with. And I went to Wall Street because all my buddies had been there for 7 or 8 or 10 years. Said there's revolution coming. But even all my years at Wall Street, I was so fortunate. I was in the right place at the right time, and in new businesses, and had great opportunities. But I always knew, for me, I wanted to have a broader impact on business and impact of a company and leading it and being involved in it. So I spent the last 3 years at JP Morgan with a coach who was supposed to be helping me be a better leader even of JP Morgan, the global businesses that I ran. We just worked on what was happening in the world, where could I go and find that destiny to do the things that were important to me. So knowing yourself is so important, and it leads to good decisions. If you're not true to yourself, in the long run, you'll be very dissatisfied. At the same time, that awareness of myself is people who can combine awareness of themselves and think about what's happening around them have such great opportunity to match the interest, the passion, the things that are important into where the world is headed. And I talk about waves because I'm a big believer that there are trends that happen and that you'd much rather be on the side of something with going to have great momentum than something that is just dribbling along, and that your chances for opportunity and impact and value creation are a lot higher. And I was very fortunate in that regard, had a coach who was helping me think about it, and I saw the internet wave coming in the late 90s and the information technology revolution, and for me that wasn't the place to go because I really didn't have that high regard for big companies, but because for good reason. I thought they were risk averse. I didn't think they were intense enough in what they did. But I didn't dislike them because they were big, but I thought internet, you had to wear a black t-shirt, shave your head, and hate all big companies for religious reasons. And I said that wasn't the trend that I wanted to do. But biotech was a revolution coming in molecular biology that would allow small people in institutions, because of the change in the technology, to compete with people with huge infrastructures. And in fact, people with huge infrastructures probably at a disadvantage because of the legacy baggage, et cetera. And so finding that right trend, to find the place that you want to go, is so critical. Of really being sensitive and aware to what's happening around you are things that I think are critical for success. At the same time, no great things happen. Outstanding results are not produced without taking significant risks. If you want to be mediocre, set good high goals. If you want to produce superior results, set aspirational goals. And I have to tell you, sometimes to find those places of risk, you have to look in places that you wouldn't think you should look. And they're not the hot spots of today. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about how fortunate I was to have somebody who cared about me when I was in the Marine Corps. A general that just died this past July, Ernie Cheatham, a great man. And he had just been promoted to Major General. And we were stationed together at 4th Marine Amphibious Brigade in Norfolk, Virginia. And he said, "Bob, you heard I got promoted to Major General." I said, "Yeah, General, I know you got promoted. It's so great. It's so exciting." And he said, "Listen, I'm going to take over the 1st Marine Amphibious Force in Camp Pendleton for the Pacific. I want you to come and be my aide de camp for 18 months, and you can be a company commander for 18 months. And I've been in the Marine Corps about 5 years at the time, and I said, "General, I'm not sure that I'm going to stay in the Marine Corps, And he said, but I said, "But I'm not going to be a Hollywood Marine, go to California. If I go back to the infantry, the fleet, I'm going back to the 3rd Marine Division. Okinawa, Korea, we're no families, heads are shaved, we're the tip of the spear, it's the first to fight, it's the reaction force, et cetera." And this big man who had been in the NFL for 1 year, looking down, and he goes, "Hugin, you are so blanked up. You make me sick. Do you know, in Camp Lejeune, we've got drugs in the barracks. We have race problems all over. We have Marines on food stamps. We have Marines pumping gas at the 7-Eleven on the weekends. And you want to go to freaking Okinawa? You go where the problems are. That's where opportunity for leaders to make a difference and affect things in a most positive way." I never forgot it the rest of my life. JP Morgan, I found places where were difficult, either new or uncertain futures, or opportunities in Turkey and different areas where we thought were disasters, and turning bad things into good things produces great things. So taking risk is not something you should seek to avoid. Taking risk is something you should seek to achieve every day, and increasing levels of risk. So, and even at Celgene, so I identify this company, Celgene, former Marine, as the chairman and CEO, so I know he won't lie to me. He'll exaggerate about how things are, but he won't lie to me. And I'm thinking, this place is hurting, but I have a good feeling, and I'm going to learn something every day here. So they say, "I want you to see the guy, the CFO, who's retiring." And so we go to this O'Connor's pub for corned beef and cabbage, and we're having a beer and stuff. And he said, "Bob, you shouldn't take this job. This place is screwed up." Whoa. I said, okay. Then I call up a friend of mine's father, a guy named John Quinn. He ran at that time ran part of the Graduate Engineering School, University of Pennsylvania. His technology, was involved with biotech companies. A very guy. I said, John, I'm thinking about going to Celgene. He goes, Celgene? Oh, boy, that's a leaky boat to get into. You know, the tide is rising, and if you have to go in that boat, oh man, find another boat. But if you go into it, as soon as it starts sinking, the tide's rising, so jump into another boat. Okay, good, thank you, John. And then the last person I talked to was a guy that I had interviewed at JP Morgan. I interviewed a lot of the military people. A guy, Steve Tye, who was an Army guy, Wharton guy. He left JP Morgan, went to Merrill Lynch, became the head of pharmaceutical research, then the head of all equity research. And I say, Steve, I know when you were at JP Morgan, one of our first equity co-managements was with Celgene in '92 when they were a water purification company, weren't a pharmaceutical company. He goes, oh, Bob, you know, some nice people there, but $200 million market cap. You know, if you're going to go there, maybe you could clean it up and sell it for $400 or $500 million. And I said, so I see Steve every once in a while, great guy. Say, yeah, we're thinking about selling it, but maybe not for $400 or $500 million. Our market cap today is like 74 billion or something. So, but anyway, taking risk and knowing yourself and making judgments for yourself and deciding your future to create your own future, not let somebody else for you. At lunch we talked about, I just think it's so important for successful people to have expertise in what they do. And the opportunity to learn is something that should happen every day, and building expertise so you have that core inner feeling of confidence that you're expert about something, one function or another. So I really encourage people to think about becoming expert, and I'll tell you about the lesson that I learned where someone cared about me, and it has a Darden angle to it. So I graduate from Darden, I go to JP Morgan for the summer, and anyway, great thing. So I finished the training program, blah, blah, blah. I go to the capital markets, and we're starting derivatives. We had done the first interest rate swaps with the World Bank and the first currency swaps with RJR Nabisco. And Tony Meyer is the number 3 guy in the bank, Princeton guy, didn't go to business school. But I helped write a case. He's going to teach in Fred Sargent's class in investment banking second year. And I'm helping write the case. I'm going to fly down to Darden with this bigwig guy in the bank, the number 3 guy, and I'm this guy 6 months out of the training program. Oh, I said, my opportunity, driving in the car to the airport with Tony in the back seat. So he'll get into the car. This guy's like that tall. I'm sitting on the side. And I said, Tony, this has been great. I kicked the butt in the training program, finished the top of the training program. I chose capital markets because I think that's better for me than M&A. And I said, but I'm ready. I've kicked butt for 6 months here. I'm ready to get specific client assignments. And this guy started leaning back against the car, going, what is this nutcase guy coming on a little strong here? You know, I know, you know, we knew each other. And he says, whoa there, buddy, slow down, slow down. Think about it. You're in a position of learning. We're paying you to learn the building blocks of our industry. Value creation comes from the different components at the very basic level of any industry or company, that you need to understand those basic building blocks of value creation, because the great leaders, the great financiers, the great industry leaders are people that understand value creation, and in a dynamic, changing world when everything looks mysterious to people, who can assemble those pieces of value because they understand the fundamental building blocks of value and what drives success. He said, so shut up, be lucky, don't let them give you clients. They'll suck your brain dry. You'll have to learn everything about them and not about what you need to learn to be the most successful person you could be. I don't tell you how many people I would have. JP Morgan was a changing organization, and we'd have these old line bankers come that want to be more investment bankers, very senior people, older than me. They come to work in my area, and I say, listen, don't worry about who you are. Don't worry about how old you are, how much experience you have. Learn the business. Learn it first before you think that you have to go out and do something, because if you don't have that core expertise. And then the last thing on this topic that's really important, when I think about interviewing people, the most important thing to me, other than values and certain things, are they learning agile? Do they care about learning? Are they curious every day? Are they thinking about, how am I going to learn something to be more valuable tomorrow? When I was 45 years old, this is how bizarre I am. When I was 45 years old, I had a successful career, and I wrote 8 personal growth objectives. I said, when I'm 65, how when you're 45 years old, think about, I said, when I'm 65, what do I have to be so that I'll be important, I'll be valuable? And I wrote down 8 growth objectives for me. And it took me, only actually about 4 years, I actually checked them off. Be strategic, do this, and with ways they had to demonstrate it. And so learning all the time is critical to long-term success. And it's something that should be part of your life forever. Aspirational goals, right? Got to take significant risks. If you don't set aspirational goals for yourself and your organization, you're going to achieve mediocrity if you're lucky. I'm going to tell you a quick story about that. John Jackson, the chairman, CEO of Celgene, former Marine, Yale guy, NCID, MBA, great guy. 2003, our second ever analyst day ever. A Grand Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan. He's at the front of the room. He has one slide, the last slide of the day. There were 3 of us that were in the company in those days, John, Sal, and myself. Sal and I did everything. John was a great guy and a leader, but Sal and I did every slide, everything, controlled everything. But somehow, John couldn't do PowerPoint if his life depended on it. He had a slide, and Sal and I didn't, where'd the slide come from? And so he says, thank you for coming. And I want to tell you about Celgene in 2008, in 5 years from now. Our revenues around that 12 months, about 200 million. The analyst said, if they're lucky, they could have 750 million of revenue in 2008. So he said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And in 2008, we're going to have revenues of $1.5 billion. Sal and I went, what's he kidding me? He 1.5 billion, what is he saying? We said, he clearly doesn't plan to be here in 2008 is what we said, which was true. But he and I are very, very close friends still today. But that included licensing and acquisitions or anything. Without acquisitions or licensing, we exceeded that goal by 29% that year. And with all the caveats that he had in it, we exceeded it by almost 50%, 45%. A ridiculous goal. No, it was reachable, but you had to have the conviction that you were going to set the kind of targets and goals that you can for yourself. I want to go back to risks for a second, just to tell you the magnitude of risks that you can take if you're expert about what you're doing. I was involved in the marketplace, in the markets, capital markets firm at Celgene. John Jackson was a leader, a risk taker, and the two of us were a good pair together. I joined Celgene, I traded 6 weeks of cash left the day I joined. We got so fortunate, the market went, some things went. We raised $350 million, we had to give $70 million to a selling shareholder. We had $280 million in cash. First time this company has ever had any money. What do companies do with that cash? They put it in money markets, right? That's liquidity. We bought, because interest rates were high, spreads were wide, we bought 30-year BBB corporate bonds, 20-year, 15, 10-year corporate bonds, BBB rated. I don't think the audit committee really knew what we were doing. We bought broken converts. We bought Metarex convert, we bought Averon convert, we bought Vertex converts, broken converts, 50 cents on the dollar. Every single one paid out at par. We invested the next 3 years more than $100 million. When I went there, the whole annual budget of the company was $19 million. We invested more than $100 million in R&D for those 3-year period of time by capturing the gains on that risk, the investments that we took. We sold our intellectual property to Switzerland when we had no employees outside the United States in 2004 to use up our tax loss carry forwards that were coming, because 2003 was the first year we were profitable after 17 years of loss making. So we took great risks, and because of that has had great impact because we made good decisions and the risks turned out to be right. The most important thing that I will tell you about my life and my career is the sense of purpose. That I think it really is what life is all about. It is what gives meaning to life. If you have a purpose for what you do and why you do what you do. I was very fortunate in all the organizations I've been at, Princeton, the Marine Corps, Darden, JP Morgan, all have a strong sense of purpose. And Celgene certainly does. The Marine Corps gives you that sense of purpose and responsibility and feeling. But it is what really provides the kind of engagement, satisfaction, and impact and value creation by having a mission and a vision. And I'm going to tell you the Celgene fact that happened that changed my life. So I go to Celgene. The first they give me this bill, I think it's 15 million. It says, I said, 15 million? We can't afford it. It goes, it's 15,000. Oh my God. I'm saying billions, they're saying 100,000. And it's a different world. But I'm a financial person, even though I'm a business person. I want to be a broad-based business person. That was the deal I made when I came there. And it was like, I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I tell a story. We always have the mission statement of Celgene first, but it was words to me. I knew I believed about innovation and disruptive technologies, and I believed in the science, but I'm not so sure I really understood the patient component of it. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, I was the president of the company, and I was at a medical meeting in Chicago, American Society of Clinical Oncology meeting, and they wanted me to have my picture taken with this 15-year-old boy, a cancer patient, and a 40-year-old, 6'3", retired NFL linebacker who was also a cancer patient. So I felt I don't like to, I didn't feel like you're prostituting somebody, and I felt nervous about it. Did the picture. We invited them to come to our town hall meeting at Celgene, which we have a town hall meeting that we talk about the results of the quarter and important issues of the company every quarter after the results are out. So we have a big tent in Summit, New Jersey, 400 people, almost all the employees of Summit are there. And we have Ryan Davidson talking at this podium, and he had brain cancer. And one of our drugs kept him stable for about 15 months, let him go back to school. This frail, pale, white kid, and he's crying. And he can't read the thing, can't read his talk. Every single person in the audience is crying. So Elijah Alexander comes up, this big African-American guy. He stands behind him and he reads Ryan's message. Not a dry eye in the place. And then he sits down and Elijah tells his story. And I'm sitting with his wife. He's got kids at that time, 7 and 9. How he retired from the NFL after 10 years, retired from the Raiders. He said, I got diagnosed with this disease. Everything failed. I went from 247 pounds to 139 pounds. I was on death's doorstep, and your drug, we had to discover in the room, saved my life. And not a dry eye in the place. And after it, he comes over and says, Bob, it's a Friday, it's like 1 o'clock. He says, Bob, understand you belong to a nice golf club. How about playing golf? I said, yeah, tomorrow morning. I belong to Club Baltusrol around the corner from my house. I said, Kathy, we're not going away this weekend. I'm playing golf tomorrow morning. And he gets up, we play golf. I got the discoverer of the drug, Revelman, to come with us, and a friend of mine, a football player. We walked the 18 holes, the most spectacular time. I'm a sports nut, telling sports stories and stuff. It's just the most wonderful thing. We have lunch. By the end of the lunch, I don't ever want to see the guy again. All I'm thinking about is, what are we going to do for him when it stops working? It was just so overwhelming that this guy needs us so desperately. He died 6 years later. I went to our stem cell therapy research area. We put up one of these reverse clocks where you say you're going to file an IND in 6 months, 27 days, 11 hours, 10 minutes, and 50, and it scrolls backwards. I said, let me just tell you who we work for. We work for the patient. Because if we make a difference in patients' lives, that's what the purpose of our company, and it will take care of itself. We will do well if we do the right thing. And so having a sense of purpose is incredibly powerful, not only for incentives for people to be engaged and do great things, but to give a sense of meaning to people's lives. And I don't think you can ever forget the basics of character, values, and reputation. That you need to be who you are, I need to be who I am. I have a clear sense of what's right and wrong, and people who live their life that way have so much more confidence and ability to not be conflicted about things and can make much better decisions. And I've been so fortunate to be at Darden, to be in the Marine Corps, to be at Princeton and JP Morgan and Celgene, places that care about values and encourage people to understand what's important and prioritize things in the most appropriate way. And some of that values is also family values. One of the reasons I'm at Celgene is that it happened to be 15 minutes from my house. Now it's 1 mile from my house, and it was close by. I was having dinner at my house on a Sunday night. My daughter was at that time 7 years old, and she says to me, "See you next weekend, Dad." She didn't know I lived there during the week. She thought I only lived there on the weekends, because I would leave 5:30 in the morning. I'd travel half the time, and I'd be home even if I didn't have a dinner or something. I'd be working till 8:30, and she'd be in bed at 8:30. She didn't know I lived there. I said, "I'm on the Morgan recruiting video." So they go, "Well, I'm a family man." I think to myself, that's a lot of bull. But I said, what do you stand for? What's important to you? Don't be afraid to know what you stand for and be who you are. It makes life simpler and much more valuable. And even at Darden, I don't think they like me to tell the story, but when I was here, I was a commanding officer of a Marine Reserve unit in Lynchburg, Virginia. I went down there every Wednesday afternoon and 2 weekends a month. I officiated each year. I was here 70 high school and college basketball and baseball games. I lived my life. Those things that I wanted to do, they were important to me. You have to live your life the way you want to. The other thing about character and value and reputation that I think is clear to people who see clearly on this issue is that success does not breed complacency. People who really understand values and character, success breeds humility, success breeds obligation and responsibility to do better. And I think that's all of the things that you talk about in a lot of classes here in ethics and things, and don't underestimate the importance of thinking about these things, because it will simplify your life and it will add much more value to your life. The last thing I'll tell you that I think is extremely important, my kids, myself, I know when I feel good about myself how much more effective I am. When I have confidence that I've done the right thing and I feel good about myself, I'm willing to take risks. I'm willing to deal with conflict. I'm willing to look to maximize opportunities. If you don't feel good about yourself and you're not happy, how can you possibly think that you can compete in a world that is filled with people who do have that confidence and that self-esteem and good inner feelings? So find a way for you to really have that confidence, that self-esteem. And I want to tell you, I'm not here to be evangelical or anything, but I go to church. And for me, I found it in the Marine Corps. I would go to church, and I was stationed in Okinawa or Korea. It gave me a period of solace to think about my family. It made me think that there were more important things in the world than me. And it made me realize that my problems weren't so bad, that there were more important things in life than my little problems that I had to deal with. So whether it's yoga, meditation, or what it is, you need to find that space for yourself so you have that confidence, that comfort in self, that you understand yourself and you're able to do the things that will fully maximize the opportunity for you. So thank God I don't do it at Dennis John Colley's class, so that we'd be there till after lunch, we'd miss lunch. But those are the things that, as this talk gave me the opportunity to step back and think about, what has it been that has helped me do the things that I've done and take the risks I've taken and be so fortunate for so many people to help me think about these things and give me direction to help guide me in a way that has allowed me to have a lot of impact in the areas where I've operated. Now, I also have to talk a little bit about Celgene, right? Because they are paying my salary and I have no complaints about that. And I said I'm also not going to be invited 10 years from now to come back. So I don't have to. I do worry about Celgene's performance in the next 10 years because we invest for the future. But I said, okay. So I asked this guy Joe Hand, who works for me, say, okay, who else is coming to this leadership series? Celgene. These people don't even know who Celgene is. I said, well, who are the other companies? He said, well, let me look at them. They got a lot of great companies coming. They got Campbell Soup. Who else? They got General Mills, Emerson Electric. And I think all those companies have beat the S&P 500 the last 10 years. And I said, I'm good friends with George Scangos, who's the CEO of Biogenidec. I say, we always like to do as well as Biogenidec. Where are they? Oh, yeah. Some other big companies that Darden likes to think they're part of, Walmart and all the Johnson & Johnson stuff. They also beat the S&P 500. And then my friend George Scangos, Biogenetic, they beat those companies in the ground. And I said, who's the best company in the world, right? Has to be. There's somebody that must have done a lot better than these guys. It's Google, right? But I have to tell you about Celgene. That's the 10-year Celgene, because we have a purpose, and we've been so fortunate to have innovation and made a difference in patients' lives, and for over a long, long period of time. We also had a philosophy of being understated and not make a big splash about Celgene, because we don't want to be a target. Today we are more active. I just finished my term as the chairman of Pharma, which is our industry group, where because of the success that we've had, our industry is under such attack by so many people around the world. If the people who are successful don't stand up for the small companies that come from nowhere, that really develop the innovation that will keep our society healthy and economically prosperous, those of us that are successful have to stand up and say, we're not afraid to be attacked and to be challenged. We can't just sit on the sidelines, because being an owner of what you do is so important. We're not victims and we're not bystanders. We're owners in everything we do, and we need to make sure that we stand up and fight for the things that we think are important. So it has been an amazing 10-year run for Celgene in the highest revenue growth, the highest earning per share growth of any company in our industry over the past decade. But it wasn't always that way, and that's why we just start out with the fact that when you look for opportunity, when you're here at Darden, don't be afraid to turn over a lot of different stones. You don't know where that great opportunity can come from. And if you look at the prospects of Celgene in June of 1999, you would have never projected that curve. In fact, the first 3 years I was at Celgene, we were voted one of the top 10 companies to go bankrupt in America. And as I said, we had 6 weeks of cash left when we joined. John Jackson and I tell the same story. My first day was the day before the annual meeting. He wanted me to start that day and all this other stuff. So I come, and we have like 2 finance people in the company. I spend the day with them, and John comes by my office 5 o'clock at the end of the day, and he leans against the opening of the door and says, Bob, we got a board dinner. We probably should get going pretty soon. He said, how's it going? I said, John, the liquidity issues are a little more serious than I had realized. And he tells the exact same story, but we did pretty well in financing the company, and because we've invested in the future, we've invested a higher percentage of our revenues into R&D. We're a long-term business. We don't know whether it'll be successful for 10 or 15 years after we make the investments today. We have to have a long-term perspective, and we're accelerating our long-term investments. We're not sitting where we are. We are working every day to redefine the way we can think about the future. And we've been indeed fortunate because of that. And we have built one of the most promising high potential pipeline in every aspect of the areas that we compete in hematology, oncology, and certain inflammatory diseases. And we're going to continue to build that where we think we have competitive advantage. And one of the things that I mentioned at lunch that I want to spend a second on is that we're a small company, right? We're not Johnson & Johnson. We're not those guys. Those are all good guys, great companies. But we have had a great impact on the industry. In 2008, the world was ending for a lot of people. Our prospects were improving in many different ways. How can we really turn the tables? This little company that doesn't have access to some of the greatest minds in the world, doesn't have the respect, but we now have some cash when other people are hurting. How do we redefine the R&D paradigm in biomedical innovation? And we embarked on a whole different collaborative strategy of synergistic partnerships where we have iterative learning and build campaigns around technologies that we learn from our partners' failures, we learn from our successes, our failures, they learn from their failures and success, and we work together to have win-win solutions with academic medicine, with small companies in areas where we have organic, competitive research, technological advantage, and pick those spots and play to win as broadly as possible with a community of people that share your vision of the potential of that technology or that specific target area that you're focused on. We have changed the industry. You read the paper today, AbbVie's doing this, Johnson & Johnson's doing that. R&D is different in America, and has to be, because the economic circumstances are very different than they were just a few years ago. And so you can have impact at a company that is not one of the biggest names in the industry. Again, it was a long road. The road never ends. All I worry about is tomorrow. 17 years of loss making. Think about the people that hung with him. Options expired worthless after 10 years. The stock did not hit the IPO price for the first 12 years of the company. 12 years. This is a tough business. And just as we thought about what happened, but one thing you have to think about is what motivates you, what motivates people. We were fortunate. We were a survival company. We had no choice. We weren't beating people up to say, if you don't get this done in 6 weeks, you're going to get fired. No, we're going to say, if you don't get it done in 6 weeks, we're going to go out of business. And nothing mean about that. It leads people to work together and find creative solutions. The other thing that I think is differentiated Celgene, especially in the early days, but even today we work hard on it, is that turning adversity into opportunity. There are people that see the world and they see a bump in the road, and others see that bump in the road as changing the whole way and may allow you to go someplace else or do something different that will really give you competitive advantage. This company has turned adversity into opportunity in such dramatic, meaningful ways that have made such a difference in our future. And that's the people who can think about opportunity and turning challenges into opportunity are the skill set and the kind of people you want to work with. All guided by the mission. We don't ever start a presentation at Celgene without the mission first. And we are so fortunate, we have a couple of Celgene people here. It is the patient at the center of what we do, because we know there is no good result if the patient isn't benefited, not just from a sense of purpose, but there's no business model that says you'll be successful if you don't make a meaningfully increasing difference in the lives of patients who are underserved today. The mission has to be at the center of what we do and is absolutely there. And we have to validate this all the time, because as you get bigger and more successful, people become conservative. They want to fly around in corporate jets and private jets, and I frankly tell you the truth, I do that privately for myself, for my personal life, but we don't allow it at Celgene. It's not our culture. Everybody's equal, everybody works hard and do it, but it's hard as you get bigger. People want to preserve as opposed to expanding. They want to protect as opposed to finding new things to do and risks to take. A terrible thing to destroy a company if you allow that to happen. And you have to have the willingness, like we do, to split the company up if we feel we're not going to deliver the kind of value-added outcomes because of the creativity and the kind of intensity and passion that we bring to it. We lose it. We shouldn't be a separate company. We should be different kind of companies and break it up to smaller so we don't have the diseconomies of scale that big companies have. And we validate it all the time. And we're clear about the things that differentiate us. The patient has to be first. We're not looking for incremental change. We want disruptive technologies. We want to change the course of the disease or the way it's treated, whatever else it is. The culture, the values of how people operate are so important. And we have to, despite a long-term view on things, have to have a ruthless focus on operational excellence. You don't get people to give you strategic confidence and flexibility if they don't believe you execute well. The long term is made up of a lot of short terms, and delivering in the here and now produces the greatest possibility of great success in the long term. But in the end, it's about people. Are people energized? Do they care? And do they make a difference? And that has been a powerful business model for us, and we have the confidence to invest in that model and continue to invest in that model. And the future looks very bright for us, though this is an incredible risky business, and we see we've had many years of increasing growth, and we see in our hands tremendous growth, and we're focused on 2020 and 25 and 30 now. We're making investments that we believe will transform diseases in 2025 and 2030. This is a long-term, risky business. But it is also a great time to be in this industry, because never have the prospects been so good. The revolution in molecular biology combined with the revolution in information technology combined is changing the tools, changing the speed at which new information is discovered in biology and chemistry. This is the beginning of the golden age of the biological revolution. It is a great time, a great time to be in this industry of looking to make a difference in people's lives, because their discoveries will be profound over the next 10 or 15 years. But it's an incredible challenge, because we have a tough situation in all developing worlds. We have a race. We have a terrible demographic problem in all of the developed world. We have aging populations. And regardless of as healthy as we are, aging populations require more health care. The body wears out. Alzheimer's. Cancer is generally a disease of the elderly. Diabetes is most profoundly impacted as people age and they can't manage the situation. The costs rise dramatically as people age. And we're in a race. Can we invest in innovation to solve those problems before the situation doesn't work? And so we hear people who want to be short-sighted and say, don't invest in the future, cut now, don't reimburse this, don't do that, retrench and ration. That's not the answer for the future. The future is to invest in research and development. It has been the hallmark of America. It's differentiated our economy for the last 50 years, and it's one that will be part of the solution. So the things you hear and read in the newspaper, I have to tell you, are not new. Different order. This one's supposed to, I messed up the order. We're the race. This is the race slide. Sorry about that. Can we have solutions before the demographics overwhelm us? And this issue, in terms of investment, has been with us a long time. So don't be alarmed by the press clippings, and don't be afraid to go beyond those press clippings, because the issue of investing in the future has been a challenge for America from the 1800s and on. Everybody wants to say, why do we need it? Well, let me tell you why we need to invest as a society. One, that we're spending our money in places that have the most effectiveness. We have aging population. We've got to do a better job of only investing in the right places. But the system works. When you invest in the future, you do have new solutions, and innovation does make a major difference in it. But it is not well understood by the public at large. People don't realize, when I was a kid, it was not uncommon for someone's father or your uncle to die of a heart attack in the 50s. It was like when people turned 50, there was like a dread that went on in those families. And God, if they make it to 60, the odds of living are pretty good. My kids don't even know that we had a 45% reduction in death rates from heart attack and heart failure from 1999 to 2005 because of new interventions and new medicines. We have a 70% reduction. If you were active in the business world in the 80s, the AIDS epidemic was going to destroy America. You would not believe the comments that people can put on slides as to what people said about it. Today, we've reduced that death rate so dramatically, 90% because of new medicines. We can reduce the cost of so many things with medicines. The length of people's lives in America has been lengthened because of biomedical innovation, and the quality of life is so much more positive because of the inventions that have been made by people who have invested in R&D in the future. We're a leader in it, but we're at risk. We're at risk. China, every place in the world understands what a tremendous economic impact it is when you invest in biomedical innovation and research. And we're in a big debate in our society, and that's why, when I think about Lindsay Lohan and her rehab problems, it is very frustrating to me that we have done such a poor job as a society to engage people in understanding how dramatically this is going to affect your life over the next 10 or 15 years. The quality of economic life in America, the quality of patients' lives in America is going to be depending if we can preserve the progressive policies that encourage the risk-taking and the challenges and ensure access to innovative therapies to patients in our country. Europe had a big lead over us 40 years ago, 35 years ago. Today, they've abandoned it. They've cut back on R&D. They don't care about innovation, and now regretting it. Even though we haven't done well the last 4 or 5 years, it's been because of the biomedical research industries in the US that we probably outperformed Europe in many ways because of that. 50% of the economic growth in the last 50 years has been related to innovation in the healthcare space. And it's going to be a big part of the jobs going forward. So we need to do a better job from our industry's point of view to convey the message of what we've done for people in the past, the important economic value to our society to have this industry practiced here and not in China or someplace else. And we're working hard on doing that, but we've got to make sure we find a way to let people know that we are part of the solution. These tremendous challenges that we have that are overwhelming, if you look at the numbers, it's so scary. The race with the aging population against innovation is in 2040, it's expected that we'll spend $800 billion on nothing but institutionalizing in the direct care of Alzheimer's patients. We spent $550 billion on defense last year. We will have no discretionary spending in America unless we decide to do something radical the way we treat old people if we don't find a solution for Alzheimer's. Diabetes, obesity, metabolic diseases, and cancer are also part of that problem. We will really jeopardize the economic underpinnings of all of the developed world if we don't deal with these problems. And we need to get people engaged in the debate. So when people make choices about policies and laws, that they're informed. They're not about one sector issue, but they're about the broad ecosystem of healthcare and how it affects our economy, how it affects the lives of our people, and what it means for our society over the next 30 or 40 years. These decisions are going to be made in the next 4 and 5 years. And I urge you to think about it, engage in it, learn about it, and become as informed as you can so you are the kind of citizenry that can be leaders in ensuring that our society, whatever the decisions are, that we're proud of the decisions that we make as to how we're going to make these decisions. Which, sure, national defense is important. How we deal with the world around us, this will control national defense, because if we don't solve these problems, there will be no money for national defense, or will change the life of seniors and sick people in the world to a way we'll go back 400 years in terms of the way we have to treat them for what we can afford by the scale of the numbers of people suffering from those diseases. It's a positive story, though, because we are on the verge of major breakthroughs. We've got to keep fighting to ensure that people understand the promise of the future. We've made a great difference, and we have the potential to make an increasing difference in our economy and the lives of the people that we seek to serve. That's Celgene's mission, it's the mission of our industry, and it's my personal message. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you for joining us. And we have time, and I'm glad to stay for other questions after people. I know people have to go, so don't hesitate to. You certainly won't offend me. I'm very appreciative that you actually came to not play softball or something.
Yeah, hi. My name is Marcus Stamp, and I don't go to Darden, but I got a question for you. It appears to me like your business is much like wildcat drilling, where you can sink a lot of money into a project and come up with absolutely nothing. And throughout your whole presentation, you didn't say anything about your medical background and how you...
I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. No. I stayed at the Darden Inn.
So that leads me to believe that you have very good people working with you that give you the guidance to figure out which project are we going to invest in that we might reduce our risk to the point where it's going to be profitable. So how do you determine who those people are going to be, and what do you look for in those people to help you make that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question on multiple fronts, the whole business strategy of the industry. The only disadvantage we have to the oil and gas industry, they have the LLPs that allow investors to get tax deductions and we don't have the same situation. So we're at a tax disadvantage as an industry to other industries that have the exact same issues. It's not completely unfair to say it's very similar. You drill wells, you just look to discover new drugs, and as long as the patent life lasts and it's the best drug out there, you'll do very well. Once the patent life ends or the well dries, you got to start over again. We have a little bit a value process of how we add value beyond that, but it's a risky, technologically driven business. And there have been many, many studies about what leads to good decision making, what differentiates people that have higher research productivity, and one of the great problems in our society has been a dramatic decline in research productivity over the last 15 years in the biomedical world. Part of that is because of the human genome that people believed, and they were set up to look at the human genome to say, we thought, most people thought we'd have 125,000 genes. The mouse has 29,000 genes. So we thought it'd be easier, each individual gene. Well, it turns out we have 22,000 really operating genes. So the puzzle is much more complex in terms of downstream signaling, epigenetics, impact on which genes are turned on, and the whole cascade of intracellular pathways, protein pathways that are directed by genes, which are multifunctional because there are so few genes. And so the research had to be restructured and redone. But the studies, and our personal view is that you have to love it, right? And you have to be willing to study it and understand it, but it has to be simplified to a level to make good decision making. So two things: you have to be able to have confidence that you're willing to have an opinion about it and argue and listen to people and make decisions. They joke, they call me, I'm the chief R&D guy at Celgene. I'm going, please don't say that, because that would be really embarrassing externally to the company if that were the case. But you have to have good people, and so the studies have shown it's the people that matter, and you don't need a lot of them. There's a woman, Jilly Evans, who we just helped start a company called Pharmaceutical in San Diego. She was a drug hunter. She's a drug hunter. Grandmother from New Zealand. 5 drugs at Merck she helped do with Robert Gould and others. And she helped us on some skunk works a few years ago. We helped a separate lab in our San Diego lab facilities with her, and then said, I want to go start my own. We helped her start a company that we have the right to buy once she makes some more great discoveries. You don't need many great drug hunters, but you need people who understand the issue, and the leadership has to be willing to say, this is not black magic. There has to be logic and understanding to what you're doing, and you make your bets. And you don't know for 10 years where they're right. But it is where the most fundamental value is created, by making that judgment as to investing in the right places in R&D. Our own model of being more collaborative of it, we do think also gives us an advantage, because one of the hardest things is to stop programs, and then you're wasting your money on something you should have stopped earlier. When you're collaborative, only 1 or 3 of the collaborators has to raise their hand and say, this isn't going to work. You have more probability of answering the question negatively earlier, which then allows you to invest more in the new opportunities that you find. So it's a very complex, fundamental question that you raise, and it is absolutely core. And as I think about when I make investments in companies, or as an individual or as part of Celgene, it's the people. And do you really believe these people have insights and the ability to make those kind of judgments? But it's very, very critical.
Okay, so this might be somewhat opening Pandora's box, because I'm sure this affects you dramatically and you have very strong thoughts on it. But I'm very interested in the future of regulation in this country and worldwide, and the FDA in particular. I'm just kind of looking at your thoughts on where that's headed, what you think maybe the FDA is how they're going to affect companies like yours in the future, particularly in aspects like in more niche markets like orphan drugs.
Yeah. No, I mean, I actually was last night at a dinner about this very subject, about what kind of legislation we're going to have in the 21st Century Cures Act that'll be introduced probably in February of next year. And Peggy Hamburg has been the commissioner for 5-6 years now, and the leadership of the FDA is pretty constructive on these issues and understanding where they are. There's some tremendous structural issues, the inability to hire people because of the pay scale, and the ability of, once you are knowledgeable, that you're very attractive to other people who can pay more. There are some very, very serious structural issues with the FDA, and I think that there's alignment in our industry about what's needed, and we're playing a very active role to advocate for policies and laws that will allow us to remain competitive as possible. So we support a strong, rigorous, science-based regulatory operation. It's very tough. And Ian Reed, who's the CEO of Pfizer, but he's a friend of mine, he and I are like, we don't like to get us together, because then we beat up on some of these people, because they have to recognize they have to be part of the solution. They're not just stop. In the United States, it is about as good as it is around the world. Europe is not as effective in terms of encouraging innovation from a regulatory point of view. Japan has some positive things, but they're more slow, and so despite all the problems, it's not the fundamental problem that causes us from not solving the problems, but it is a major time and effort that we focus on the future of the FDA.
Hi, Bob. I have two questions. The first one is the easy one. When you talk about learning, when we're coming out of Darden, most of us will be thinking moving up the management chain. And how does learning weigh into how we move up? Because the more time you spend in learning, I know building a strong foundation is important, but how do you weigh that? The second one is Celgene is spending a lot of money into gene therapy, epigenetics, or cell therapy. That's following the general trend, like BMS, all those companies are going into collaboration with other companies. I want to know how Celgene stands out in this market trend, going into every single area, how your company strengths can make you stand out in 5 years or 10 years.
Yeah. The first question, I think really great organizations care about their high potential people and will continue to challenge them, develop them, and really give them opportunity to be stretched. So I don't worry about people who are focused on learning, as long as they understand the consequence of why they're doing it and how they're adding value in their current position. I think learning is unrelated to. I don't think it has any negative effect to people advancing most quickly. I'd argue that you want to advance the people who are most quickly and able to learn new things and different things, because the one thing that we can be sure of 3 years from now, the way we do things is going to be radically different. The world's going to be different. It's going to be more complex, more competitive. And if we're not better at what we do 3 years from now than we are today, we will be falling behind. So I think the learning is not just something that somebody seeks to do. It has to be part of the fabric of how they live their life, and that they learn wherever they are and whatever they do. So I think that's fundamental. We're very clear about where we are, and on cell therapy, I'm not so sure that we have a lot. It's a risky place. We've invested more money in research and cell therapy over the last decade than any other company in the world. That doesn't mean we're still 2019 before we're talking about our first approval in that area. So we've got some very exciting things, but we need to turn it into reality. Our philosophy is very simple. If you don't have internal expertise, some type of competitive or comparative advantage, whether that be in people or intellectual property or know-how or opportunity to partner with people who will help you develop that, you shouldn't invest any money in those areas. You shouldn't partner with people if you don't have internal expertise, and you shouldn't spend internal dollars unless you have a comparative advantage. So I think that we can't be all things to all people. We spend $2 billion in R&D. That's not a lot of money when it comes to this business, how expensive it is, especially as things get into late stage trials. We have to be ruthless and invest in the right place, and we believe that needs to be a competitive advantage of our whole organization's decision-making process.
Hi, I'm from a pharmaceutical company, and I always question myself, if the competitor launches a statistically better product than ours, should we step back and let the competitors sell that better product in terms of patients' benefit? Or should we sell as much as we can and earn as much as we can to spend on R&D?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I don't see the question or the issue as clearly and as plainly as that. I'll give you a couple of examples. First of all, in most indications where we're talking about serious unmet medical needs, we don't fully appreciate the diversity of the patient population yet, though we're working very hard on targeted therapies. So if two drugs are identical and every patient responds the exact same way, it rarely happens, that there will be subsets of patients. Our own philosophy is that we shouldn't market something if we don't believe it. It's not a game. It has to be that you believe you have a positive impact. But there's also becomes a trade-off and price, right? That if these patients benefit, but those benefit more, but it's not a detriment to them and it's a lot cheaper, the system may choose to reimburse the cheaper product more than the one that's even more efficacious. So we try and influence payers to pay for the most efficacious drugs, so we're in the fortunate position that our drugs tend to be at the very top end of impact on patients. So we like that philosophy, but we have to recognize that there are drugs that are not all that much differentiated in different markets, and I don't think it's so simple of saying that, and I also don't think that in our business you can get people to do things they shouldn't do. That people are smart, payers are smart, patients are smart, physicians need to be well educated and do it. So I see rarely a conflict of that you outlined, but I understand. But we do need money. The only way we get money to invest in R&D is through reimbursement and revenue. We don't get money from the government to invest in our pipeline. It comes only because we have a good reimbursement system in the U.S. and in some countries around the world.
Thanks, and thank you so much for being here today. So this is kind of a macroeconomic question. So Celgene is a company that makes highly specialized and very expensive drugs.
High-value drugs.
High-value drugs, high-value drugs.
So very, very, very valuable to the economy, so it's very cost-effective.
So let me rephrase my question.
The price tag might be high.
Celgene is a company that makes drugs that are of high value to the economy.
And to patients.
And to patients.
Most importantly. But go ahead and ask your question. Ask a question.
Okay, so given those facts, how then do you balance entering markets where there might not be the same socioeconomic stratifications as there are in the US or Europe, and insurances that can pay for those drugs? How does your strategy change when you start thinking about entering the rest of the world's markets like Asia and Latin America?
Sure, yeah. No, it's a very important question, very good question. In many parts of the developing world, they don't even have the ability to diagnose a lot of the diseases that we treat, or the people don't live long enough to get a lot of the diseases that we treat. So we unfortunately don't have as much opportunity in some of those places. But let me talk about China, for example, which is a country that I'm very familiar with and have spent quite a bit of time, both for the industry and for Celgene, thinking about how we operate in China. China spends $300 per citizen or resident on health care. For 1.3 trillion people, $300 doesn't get you much. And they have to spend almost all of that $300 per capita on the rural poor. They've got to get clinics set up, and they've got to have, otherwise they will have tremendous social unrest issues if they don't provide a basic level of health care for that. The health minister there is a very interesting guy. The Chinese are more capitalist in some ways than we should send some American politicians over there to understand what capitalism is. But they have a very different value system, and you have to understand that China is an incredibly, incredibly complex place to operate because of the economics. So how could you possibly think that you're going to charge the same price for a drug in China that you charge in the United States? It's just impossible. And you don't. So we as an industry have many pilot programs that we look at. Tiered pricing, we look at different models as to how do we do it. We really want to make sure people understand intellectual property is not a restriction on access. Access needs to be figured out separately from intellectual property, and we should encourage innovation to have new therapies and the like. But it's a very difficult issue. I'll give you Johnson & Johnson. I don't want to speak for them, but I was talking to their head of our research a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about tuberculosis. And I don't want to, so again, this is tape, so, but I'm giving you the caveat that they have a program that says in the U.S. or the developed world, they charge X thousands of dollars for this tuberculosis product. In the more affluent developing world, it's 1/3 of the price, and it's zero in the lesser developed world where that disease is more issue. So companies have to have solutions. We have tiered pricing programs, pilots going on in South Africa and Mexico and Peru, in the Philippines. So we want to be responsive as an industry, and as companies have to find their own way. It is a challenging one when you have countries that spend huge amount of money building aircraft carriers and missiles and don't want to pay for the drugs for their people, including the country of New Zealand, which is one of the worst countries in the world in terms of providing access to innovative therapies for their citizens. So it is a complex question in the developed world and in the emerging markets. They're different issues, but they're never an issue that we should not be very open about talking and dealing with, because these are important issues and they're not simple solutions. And sometimes things don't always work out the way people want them to work out, but they're tough. But there's ways that we're dealing with it, and we're trying to be responsible in the best way that we can.
Okay, well,
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
for
we're gonna wrap